Well, Ty Burrell, before we talk about Emmys, I wanted to ask you about something that happened to you earlier this year. Alec Baldwin had won the SAG Award in your category 7 years in a row, which I'm sure you're well aware since you didn't get to make it up to the platform until this year. You beat him in his final chance for 30 Rock. What was that experience like?
Uh, Unexpected. When somebody wins 7 times in a row. I always, prepare some sort of a speech just to alleviate my own anxiety. Otherwise, I spend those awards just sort of tense about the off chance that I'm gonna, have to go up and make something up. But I didn't expect to win that. Particularly honored because he is, I just think he's one of the great sort of kind of most diversely talented actors ever. So I've never was feeling like, oh man, why in the world does he keep winning? I think he and the show were just amazing.
Yeah, well, obviously, SAG voters, Emmy voters, even Golden Globe voters from time to time have really just loved your character because you keep coming back. This year you were nominated for your 5th consecutive Emmy, and I can imagine that you may be thinking to yourself prior to the nominations, maybe this is the year that I, maybe might not make it in, but you keep coming back. What's it feel like to be on your 5th consecutive? It's pretty cool. I mean, Julie and Jesse also have that, can also brag that they've been nominated 5 years in a row, but what does it feel like, and what was it like the morning of when you found out?
The main feeling, and I'm not trying to be like overly self-effacing. I genuinely feel this way, that it's a little bit arbitrary about who from the cast is being nominated. What's not arbitrary is the reason we're still being nominated, any of us, is because the writers consistently write something that families, seem to find in some way, I mean, hopefully funny, but also in some way meaningful enough that they all sit down and watch it together. And I think it's all respect to every other show, but I think it's maybe the hardest one to write of any of the other shows that I know of on TV, because they're having to write 3 A stories, they would call it, 3 lead stories every week, which a normal storyline for a half hour would be 1 A story, 1 B story, which is a little bit smaller, and then a C story or a 3rd story, which is almost non-existent, Might even just be a couple of jokes throughout an episode. And the fact that they have written what is the equivalent of like 300 episodes, 100 and some odd episodes we've done, but they've really written in that time somewhere near 300. The level of consistency I just find really staggering, and they deserve the lion's share of the credit there.
One of the neat things, too, about what you're saying is unexpectedly from week to week, it may stay where you're all separated, and then some weeks, unexpectedly, those 3 stories combine together by the end, kind of like the old Seinfeld days. And I'm especially thinking of like the Las Vegas episode this year, which you all had things going on, but then it was like a farce, like Frasier in a way, where everything compounded by the end.
Well, that's one of my favorite episodes that we've ever done, and we've done a few, that kind of like when you're finished with them, you feel like, wow, that was really kind of special. But that one was a little bit of a risk because that format, the farce format, is always worked really well in a multi-camera because of the kind of swinging door aspect, You can really see the whole thing, like in Frasier in the cabin, in the winter cabin or whatever. It's like watching a farce on stage where you can see people going in and out of the rooms. It's sort of, theatrical, I guess, in that way. And it was a risk on the part of Brad and Paul and Chris Lloyd, Chris obviously has written a lot of farces in his past, but to do it in our format was a risk, and I think it really did work. And I think we'll, probably try, one or two more. Now that we know that it can work, I think I hope they feel confident with it, because it was a blast to do, and it turns out that the show kind of lends itself towards it.
Well, Gail Mancuso directed that. She's up for an Emmy for that, which I think is well deserved, and she won last year for your show. I'm going to interview her next week. Is there a good Ty Burrell question I could ask Gail?
How's the summer? Has she gotten to Colorado for a break? That's my question.
Okay.
I haven't seen her since we left.
Speaking of farces and Frasier, for instance, it reminded me that Modern Family won its 4th Emmy last year for series, which ties it with All in the Family, Cheers, and The Dick Van Dyke Show. Huge accomplishment. This year, you guys are up for your 5th, and you could win it and tie the all-time series champ Frasier. What does that occur to you when you're thinking about this kind of thing from time to time, that Modern Family could tie the all-time series comedy champ at the Emmys? It's a pretty big deal.
It feels pretty crazy. I think going into last year, I don't think that we were aware of that. Afterwards, we were well aware of it, because it was one of those things that people were saying immediately after the Emmys, and that was it was a pretty cool experience for the cast to kind of at the after party kind of raise a glass about that. This year, the Frasier thing is a little bit more complicated, I think, for us, because it's really Chris's show and Steve's show, and not in any way is there enmity towards a show you're competing with, but it's sort of like, if we were to win, it would be cool in a historical setting, but also, you kind of hate to do something like that at the expense of the baby of one of our leaders.
Well, when Frasier got that 5th one, they were very smart. They got Dick Van Dyke to present the award. So I think this year they ought to bring out Kelsey Grammer and David Hyde Pierce. That would be perfect.
That would be awesome. Those guys are. I know David Hyde Pierce a little bit, but I've worked with Kelsey a couple times as a director, and they're lovely guys. I'm sure they'd be game.
Well, Beyond Vegas, your episode this year for the Emmy judges is Spring-a-Ding Fling, where you're hosting the real estate brokers dinner. Tell us about working on that one, and then why that one was such a fun one for you.
Well, I've never gotten to do drag before, and my life changed. I have nothing underneath here but a skirt.
Yes,
but it was just fun. It's one of those things that they've really, bizarrely, they've established that Phil is actually capable of something like that. It's something that's so wild that if we didn't have 5 years to establish who Phil is, it might actually seem, in some ways it really, it is outlandish, but the context for Phil, it really did feel like when we were doing it that it was like, oh yeah, this is 100% what Phil would do. He would want to be sort of legendary at hosting a convention like that. So the awards banquet, So it was just fun. It's sort of there's more icing on this cake than I know what to do with. I keep feeling like, well, that's the icing on the cake because I get to do some bizarre, ridiculous thing for our show. And I am not a person who is like, oh, if only I can play, I want to play like a disabled Oscar-winning part. I am just happy as can be doing this ridiculously absurd thing that just constantly strips me of my dignity.
Nice. You know, it must be difficult, though, to pick the episode that you're going to submit to the Emmy judging panel. Did you have to mull this one over a lot? Because you've had a few highlights from the season, like Las Vegas that we talked about, The Late Show. What went into this particular episode? Like, what was it about it, apart from being stripped of your dignity, that you decided was the one to submit?
Well, I solicited a lot of advice because I can't see these things objectively, including you guys, and I was really appreciative of everyone. My wife, you know, I have a hard time sort of seeing that stuff. For whatever reason, it's more about my on-set experience for an episode, and that I don't really know always how that translates, you know. But that one I was kind of the combination of both. I got my wife. That was one. Weirdly enough, that was actually an episode that my wife, who is usually very diligently sort of supportive, actually missed that one. So when I said, "What do you think about that one?" she actually went and watched. She said, "I haven't seen this episode for some reason." Or she's never seen any of my episodes.
Yeah, that could be the truth.
She has never seen me perform.
That's right.
But it just happened to coincide with the fact that I also loved doing it. You know, I really loved doing that one. It was kind of a workout in the best way. I had to, you know, it was a lot of choreography and learning the music and all of that. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I can remember watching that back when it aired, and when you first started singing "Come Sail Away" from Styx, you were like 10 seconds in, and I thought, oh, this could be his Emmy episode. And then you come out in the dress, and I'm like, okay, you know, this has got to at least be in the discussion. And then what's so neat about it, though, beyond all the physical stuff on stage, at the end you get to be so proud of Haley for remembering those jokes. You're just the proud father at the end.
Yeah, and I love that. I think this, you know, it's a good example of how great the kids are, and I think, you know, there's just the Emmy process is sort of funny that way, but I think, you know, I would love to see the kids get recognized. Sarah was recognized, I think, for a Critics' Choice Award last year, or nominated, but. We have some incredibly talented kids, and I thought that was a great example. I thought her stand-up stuff was super funny, and yeah, it's always the way the episodes wrap up. I love doing them because they're always a little bit of a risk, you know, and we don't always hit the mark. But anytime you try to kind of do something with heart, I think Paul Simon said it about writing music or something, but when you overshoot it, it's just super saccharine, and if you undershoot it, it's sort of you know, detached and ironic. And I love the attempts that the writers try to write something sweet, and when we do hit it, and I did like the way that episode wrapped up. I feel like the reward is really high for us, at least.
And another cool thing about you guys on the show is a lot of you are also nominated together in categories. This year, you and Jesse are nominated together, and Jesse submitted Message Received, which is a great one for him, but also includes some really great stuff for you. You and Julie get to play this whole pregnancy message prank storyline, which was really funny, and also gives you that to do as well. So what about that particular episode did you enjoy?
With Jesse's, what was Jesse's storyline in that one?
Chris, is that the one where they're trying to get rid of some of the people they've invited to their wedding, and then there's a whole storyline with his dad, with Jay being not so impressed about going to the wedding? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I'm glad. I think Jesse was great in that.
Yeah.
I like that one, and also because I thought the kids had a lot to do there, and that was it's always fun when they're giving the kids more to do, and it gave Julie and I to sort of be teamed up. You have to kind of like, I think when you're writers, it's, sometimes it helps if you're in opposition to each other, but occasionally, we get to be, it's basically us against the kids. So that's always kind of a fun dynamic too.
And speaking of dynamics, you've been with us several years now, and every time I ask you this, because you're the one that brought it up after the first season, you said they never will put Eric and you together, and 5 years later, they still don't give you and Eric a separate storyline.
We brought it up with them at one point, and the justification, which who knows if it's true or not, it may just because they don't want us goofing off for an episode, but is that generally those characters tend to be the sort of the drivers of their storylines, which may also be true of Gloria in the Jay and Gloria couple. So I think what they're just, it just may just be a writing dynamic, a character dynamic that putting them together, I think it's been maybe a little bit tricky about who then takes that in the other group.
I still think your first year analysis is better. They're scared of going over budget and over time with you and Eric going off on your own one day.
I think it's very possible.
One of the highlights from the season was the annual Modern Family vacation. This time you came to Australia, which was so exciting for personally for me. Before you guys came, I swear to God, it was like the Beatles were coming. It was such a big deal. We were so just bombarded in the press and all over at Channel 10, which is the network that airs Modern Family here. Tell us about that experience coming down under.
Well, it was amazing. I wish I had seen you down there. I wish you should have figured that out, but
I think I almost I had something on that day. I was it didn't work out this time. Maybe next time.
Next time. But it was thrilling actually, because most of us had never been. Eric has been there quite a bit.
That's right.
The ads down there, but number one, we felt like the Beatles. I mean, it was amazing and a really cool experience to feel like people were appreciating the show that way, in that particular way. Although I've said to people there, what happened in LA is we got that response at the beginning of the show, and then when we go on location enough times to the same location, people really get bored with us. And trust me, if we were here more than once, you'd be very bored with us. But that was really fun and thrilling. And the other part of it was that Australia was way more than lived up to the hype. Like so many American expats, I really could see living there. I'm kind of chomping at the bit to get my wife and family down there to check it out. There's something, just being sort of like sibling cultures, but having the crazy thing about, at least we were in Sydney on the Reef, about having that beach culture and the city right there, which LA is so spread out. It was really unusual, and the Reef was amazing, and that's definitely a place we're going to go back to.
Well, speaking of exposure and popularity, we talk to a lot of the Big Bang Theory people every year, and I remember a couple of years ago, after they went into syndication and started appearing 20 times a day on TBS, they were all talking about how they thought they were popular, and then that all happened, and it was like times 10 the exposure as well as just the number of people that would watch the show. What has that been like the last year with syndication and being on the USA Network practically every time slot?
I'll give you an example. My wife and I went on a hike in southern Utah called the Subway, which is pretty, at least for us, challenging. It's about an 8-hour hike in the water. And we were alone for 6 hours, and off in the distance, you know, we finally see our first people on this hike after 6 hours, you know, alone, which was glorious to be alone on this hike. And as they get closer, the person in front just holds out his fist and goes, "Phil!" That's fun. Continued on. Yeah, I mean, it's been that, like that. I mean, it's not obviously like that every person, but it can feel that way at times, which by no means would I ever trade our situation at all, because it's been such a boon creatively and in terms of like just having a stable job for my family and but yeah, it will take you aback a little bit in terms of you're evaluating whether or not you want to go out, whether or not you want to leave the house. You know, you're kind of like, well, what's on here? What can I do right here? What's there? Just because it's changed, but you know, overall it's been wonderful.
And you've noticed the difference between, say, this time last year, well, before all that happened, and now.
I definitely do. I definitely do. And it wasn't that, you know, it wasn't that the show wasn't already popular, but now it's sort of like, you know, there were always those chances that you would kind of go through maybe a crowd or something and be able to sort of like slip through. And I would say pretty safely that is, you know, that's just not an option. And that has happened, I think, in the last year, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
People just who are like, "Please get off my television. Get off my TV."
But that's really phenomenal. And I imagine that, you know, you've been a working actor for many years, and then you finally, you know, you really hit the big time with Modern Family, and you must have thought at that, when the show was just started, it became such a big success from day dot. And now it seems to exponentially have gone up because of syndication or because of the USA Network. Could you have possibly imagined, like back in the day when you were struggling, you know, trying to find, you know, some decent work as an actor, that this would, you know, you'd be going to Australia and be going to Hawaii, you know, that's just incredible, right?
Yeah, it really is. On this same trip with my wife, we had, you know, it's about a 6-hour drive out in the desert to get there, and it's always great because you get into some great conversations, but that was one of them, which was, I think this is true of any aspect of probably all of our lives. You have to have some certain things, good and bad, hit you from the side. You know, you can't really always you try to appreciate it, but sometimes you have to have sort of epiphanies, and we had sort of a mutual, you know, kind of the same thing at the same time in the car, like, wait, wow, like this is really crazy that this has happened. Me, who couldn't really hold down a regular job, and you know, never really had an acting job that lasted for more than a few months on stage, maybe. To have had a job for 5 years and a job that I love and my wife loves, like we, you know, bring the family to set, and yeah, it's just really, it is a little, to be 100% honest, it's a little bit, I don't know if I do fully understand, I mean, or appreciate it all the time, because it's sometimes almost too much for my tiny brain.
Well, speaking of jobs, another job you've got is a film coming up later this year that's really one of the most anticipated films. I've been following conversations and so forth, and that's The Skeleton Twins with Kristen Wiig and Bill Hader. Tell us, well, first of all, when does that come out, and just tell us a little bit about you and the film.
Yeah, well, the release date, I believe, is in September. I think they're still trying to nail it down, but it may be moving to October. It's a little bit in flux, but I think it's going to be in the fall. I really love the movie, and Craig Johnson, the director. It's basically it's his second film, and it's such a shorthand, I think, for somebody who's. I mean, obviously he's done more than that, but his second real release, and it's a movie starring Kristen, Wiig, and Bill Hader, which you would really think right off the bat would just be sort of like some out-and-out comedy, but while it does have some funny moments, it's a really poignant, sometimes dark film about them as siblings and their relationship, which is complicated, and not overly, but meaningful and beautiful and not overly sentimental. And that's partly what I mean about his shorthand, is that he managed to pull off a really beautiful kind of, in some ways, really redeeming relationship without it feeling sort of saccharine.
Yeah. Well, let's I'm going to take a question from the chat room. Irish Movie Lover Forever wants to know what type of television you mostly watch and what shows you enjoyed. I guess I want to even add to that. What did you admire from the past TV season as well?
I'm really liking a lot. This puts us very out of fashion, but the thing that my wife and I are almost finally caught up on is The Wire. So that is useless.
Wow.
Have you caught all of I Love Lucy yet?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Old Amos and Andy stuff.
Fantastic.
That was kind of blowing our minds. But I am caught up on Game of Thrones. We are completely caught up on Mad Men. I'm really loving Silicon Valley.
Yeah, love that.
I really, really like that. And to me, that writing is doing something really. They're doing something really special there, because they're writing in a structured. I mean, in a structured, but like in a way that reminds me a little bit of our show, but and they still find ways to be really poignant. But it's just so subtle, But it has that structure where things kind of come back on other ideas that I think that's what I mean about being similar to our writers. That I think is so hard to do. But it's not just joke. They're doing something that's really ambitious and really cool.
Well, Ty, good luck at the Emmys here in August. It's a month from today as we're recording this on a Monday night of all things. And good luck with that, and maybe you'll get a second one this year.
Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate it, guys. It's always good to see you.